Today, I want to talk about a broad topic that I think Christians should be aware of, and I think Christians should be preparing for, because a lot of the things a lot of changes that we're seeing in at least Western society is probably a result of this, and honestly, it's changing in the direction away from Christianity, and Christians should be aware of this. So what is this? Well, have you ever wondered, for example, let's use homosexuality. Homosexuality, you can debate whether it's right or wrong with yourself or whatever but the question becomes, what did people think 50 years ago? Well, 50 years ago, a majority of people, regardless of their biasness, a majority of people believed that homosexuality was immoral, right? The religious people, like the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, all these different things seem to go against homosexuality. So a lot of people who were religious believed that homosexuality was immoral. Evolutionists, they believed that homosexuality was unnecessary because they didn't reproduce. And then, of course, psychologists, they thought homosexuality was a psychological disorder. So why the change between, let's say, 50 years ago and now, where it's considered not just acceptable, but it's praised by society as being morally right and being morally acceptable, things like that. And psychologists have taken it out of their books as being a psychological disorder. In fact, they've put homophobia in their books as being a psychological disorder. But the question becomes, why this change? Why did society go from one end of the spectrum to the opposite end of the spectrum probably within the last 20 years? Well, it's this concept called relativism. We live in what's called a postmodern world, and during modernism, that was, of course, the era before postmodernism, it was focused on objective truth, things that were true for everyone, universal truth. 2 plus 2 equals 4, 4 plus 4 equals 8, 2 times 2 equals 4, whatever it might be. It would look at the different things that were objective, things that were unbiased, and say this is truth. And of course, we had lots of scientific discoveries during this time, and Christians really had to step up to the plate, because no longer could they just say, I believe just because I believe, but rather they had to actually give reasons, because people wanted to know, and the Bible actually tells us that we need to be ready always to give them an answer, things like that. So when postmodernism came, it moved away from objective truth, and it started to deny such a claim that there is such thing as objective truth. It said there's no such thing as something that's true for everyone. But of course, that statement, and I hate relativism, I despise it with a passion, because it's so contradicting, and most people, I think, know that, but because it's more accepting of everyone, I think more people are drawn to it, not because it makes sense, but because it's very accepting. So people are drawn to it. So basically it says there is no such thing as absolute truth. Well, if that statement is true, if it's absolutely true, then obviously there is such thing as absolute truth. So it's a contradicting concept. But again, why do so many people believe in relativism? Why do so many people push for it? Is it because it's logical? Absolutely not. It's because it's very accepting. It's very inclusive. So it wants to include everyone. It says everyone's truth is true, but no one's truth is true for everyone, things like that. It focuses on subjective truth. What is true for you? What are your preferences? What are your opinions? Things like that. So when you get things like homosexuality, of course, 50 years ago, during modernism, homosexuality was not viewed in the same light because most people didn't view it as being moral. But nowadays, with relativism, they say, you know what, you get to decide your own truth. You get to decide what is right and what is wrong. Things like that. So homosexuality became accepted, and those who didn't accept it were considered as bigots or considered as haters, things like that. Of course, this was a result of relativism. And then, of course, we see another movement that is very revolving around relativism is this idea of transgenderism, the idea that what 50 years ago we would have said, obviously, a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl. They have these different chromosomes, XY, XX, whatever it might be. That's their gender. We can't decide it for them. When they can't decide it for themselves, it is what it is. But nowadays, when we're teaching people your truth is true for you, even if it's not true for someone else, then people get to decide their own truth. They get to decide their own identity. They get to decide what is right and what is wrong. So because of relativism, we've started telling people they can identify their gender, whatever they want. They can identify their age even these days. So the idea that we can decide who we are, what our identity is, how old we are, obviously our age is objective. It's not something that we get to decide. It is what it is. It's not like our favorite flavor of ice cream. We don't get to decide our age. We can decide our favorite flavor. We can't decide our age. So with that in mind, why is this a problem for Christianity? Well, first, it denies the idea that there is such thing as truth. So you might be sharing the gospel with someone. They might say, well, that may be true for you, but it's not true for me, right? Well, if God exists, then that's true for everyone. It's not just true for one person. So this is obviously an attack, not maybe inadvertently, but an attack on theism, an attack on religion, an attack on Jesus specifically, because Jesus claimed to be truth. He said, I am the way. That's an absolute, right? He didn't say, I am a way, like you can go do whatever religion you want. He said, I am the way. He said, I am the truth. Again, he didn't say, I am a truth. He says, I am the truth. He's speaking in absolutes. So with that in mind, relativism goes against Christianity, because Christianity speaks about absolutes. It speaks about objective truth. It speaks about things that would be universally true, morals that are universally true for everyone. So with that in mind, when society says that there is no such thing as absolutes, that is an attack on Christianity, inadvertently probably, but still it is an attack on Christianity. And we will find that when we try to say things like, well, this is what I believe, then they'll say, well, it doesn't matter what you believe because I believe this, and you can't tell me what's right because I get to decide what's right. Well, we don't get to decide what's right. And that's where we get to the heart of the issue of relativism. Relativism makes us our own gods. You might be thinking, what does that mean? It's a concept of humanism, this idea that we get to decide what is right and what is wrong. We get to decide our own purpose. We get to decide our own truth, things like that. It would be like saying to the boat, like acting like the boat gets to decide its own purpose, right? The boat didn't create itself. Someone created it, and the person who created it decided the purpose of the boat. In much the same way, whoever created humanity, which of course, as Christians, we believe the God of heaven created humanity, we believe that he decides the purpose of his creation. So when he created us, he decided our purpose. But humanism and relativism, they completely go against that and say, no, we get to decide our own purpose. We get to decide what is right and what is wrong. We have become our own gods, right? Because they're saying, God may have made me this gender, but you know what? I will identify whatever gender I want to identify as. God may have made some things natural and some things unnatural. God may have preferred it this way and this way. God may have said not to do this, but I'm going to do it because I am my own God. I get to decide what is right and what is wrong. God has no place in my life anymore because I have become my own God. And it's just a crazy thing. And Christians, I thought that this was going to blow over real quick because I thought nobody thinks this is logical, right? Relativism is self-contradicting. It has no foundation. It's completely inconsistent. Nobody's going to believe this, but people are believing it because it's becoming more accepting. Relativism says, I accept your truth even if I have a different truth. Like they act like there's no such thing as universal truth. And because of that, it looks more accepting. People that are attracted to relativism because of that. And it's also more humanistic, right? It makes us our own gods, and that's very attractive. Even Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Satan told them, you know what, you can become like God. And that's when they ate of the fruit, because they said, we're going to become like God. And it's just very tempting for us to want to take God's place. But let me tell you something, we would be terrible at it. And what if I say, you know what, murder is wrong for you, but it's not wrong for me, right? Because if I get to decide my own truth, if I get to decide what is right and what is wrong for me, then I can decide if murder is right or wrong for me. Things like that. It's just crazy inconsistent. It's crazy terrible. There would just be havoc if everyone accepted relativism. But this is becoming more and more acceptable in today's society. This idea that there is no such thing as truth. Logically, that doesn't make sense. There has to be truth. To say that there is no truth, well, if that statement is true, then there has to be truth. If that statement is false, then there has to be truth. It's just a contradicting concept. But Christians need to be aware of this, because this is the battle that we're fighting. We're fighting arguments that say, you get to decide your truth, I'll decide my truth. Well, how can we find level ground when we're saying that there's no such thing as level ground? Well, there's no such thing as objective truth. So it's a pretty crazy concept, but hopefully this has made you guys more aware of the problem, and maybe you guys can come up with some solutions. Certainly be praying about it. We know that truth exists, and we know that if truth does exist, then some things are right and some things are wrong, but we also know that we can't just decide what's right and wrong. There's no basis for that. There's no basis that says that we as humans get to decide our own purpose, that we as humans get to decide what is right and what is wrong. So we need to really be praying about this and trying to figure out, how does God want us to approach a world that believes that there is no such thing as truth?